Now that your husband is dead, pack up and never return. Margaret's voice, a chilling whisper, cut through the suffocating silence of the grand dining room like a shard of ice. I froze, the glass halfway to my lips. The words, a final, brutal blow delivered 7 days after Thomas's death. The sound of silver on porcelain stopped instantly. Thomas's father, Arthur, looked up from his plate, his kind eyes filled with a helpless, pleading sorrow. He was the only one who seemed to mourn Thomas for who he was, not for the inheritance he left behind. Margaret, however, saw only an empty seat at the head of the table. I looked at my mother-in-law, searching for any sign of compassion. There was none. Her gaze was fixed on the intricate patterns of the tablecloth, her face a mask of cold resolve. She had waited a week, just long enough for the funeral to pass, for the polite condolences to fade, before delivering her verdict. My purpose in this family had ended with my husband's last breath. Arthur gasped in protest, a small, choked sound, but Margaret's sharp glare silenced him. It was clear this was not a moment for discussion, it was a command. In her eyes, I was no longer a Dotunla, I was a superfluous guest, who had overstayed her welcome. A temporary attachment to her son's life that she could now, with brutal efficiency, sever. A bitter, hysterical laugh welled up in my throat, but I quickly suppressed it. There was no point in arguing. My marriage to Thomas had been my only claim to this life, and that claim was now, in Margaret's estimation, null and void. I stood, my legs unsteady, and simply said, "Excuse me." I turned and left the room. The uneaten meal and the shattered pieces of my life a silent monument to the cruelty I was leaving behind. I climbed the grand staircase, each step an echo of my departure. Our bedroom, once a sanctuary of shared laughter and whispered secrets, felt hollow. The scent of Thomas's cologne still lingered, a comforting but cruel ghost. I stood in the middle of the room, surrounded by our life, and began the surreal task of packing away 7 years of memories. I wasn't just packing clothes, I was packing away a life. I folded his favorite sweaters, the ones that still smelled faintly of him, and placed them gently in a box. I carefully wrapped the small ceramic owl he had given me on our first anniversary. A simple, silly gift that meant more to me than any of the expensive jewelry Margaret had tried to buy me. I packed the me that existed before Thomas, the one who was a person in her own right, separate from this grand house and the family that had just so easily cast her aside. I left behind the expensive furniture, the antique vase Thomas's grandmother had passed down, the family photos that didn't include me. I left behind all the things that belonged to the woman who was Thomas's wife, a life that no longer existed. I loaded the heavy boxes into my small sedan, the one Thomas had insisted on buying for me, because it was cute and zippy, just like you. Each box was heavy, but the weight in my heart was far heavier. Without looking back, I drove away from the imposing stone mansion. The manicured lawns and towering oak trees faded into the rearview mirror, and the familiar streets blurred into a sea of unfamiliar lights. My destination wasn't home. It was a bank branch in a neighboring city, a place I had only visited a handful of times. A few months before the accident, Thomas had sat me down, his face uncharacteristically serious. "My mother has a very specific view of money," he'd said, choosing his words carefully. "She believes it should stay within the family line, and that means her." He had then explained that he had created a trust account in my name, a safeguard for just in case. He saw through his mother's pretense, and knew exactly what she was capable of. I had brushed it off as a morbid joke then, but now, as I walked into the empty bank lobby, a somber, determined look on my face, I understood his profound wisdom. I withdrew every penny from our joint account, leaving it completely empty. Then, I accessed the trust account he had set up in my name. The total was staggering. It wasn't just our life savings. It was Thomas's entire inheritance, a substantial sum of money, stocks, and bonds that he had painstakingly moved from his family's accounts over the years. He had trusted me implicitly, knowing Margaret would do this. He had protected me even in death, ensuring I would be cared for, no matter what. I drove to a cheap motel, the kind with a flickering neon sign and a faint smell of disinfectant. The room was small and impersonal, a stark contrast to the suffocating opulence I had just left. The worn armchair, the faded floral wallpaper, and the simple bed were a welcome escape. I ate a sad, microwaved meal, and fell asleep, ready to face a life that was now entirely my own. The next day, my phone rang. Mother-in-law flashed on the screen. I hesitated, my thumb hovering over the accept button, wondering what new cruelty awaited me. But then I remembered Arthur's sorrowful eyes, and a flicker of curiosity won out. I answered, "Hello," I said, my voice hoarse from a night of restless sleep and silent tears. A choked sob was my only answer. "Isabella." Margaret's voice was a ragged whisper, a far cry from her usual cold tone. "Isabella, where are you? You have to come back now." "I'm gone," I replied, a bitter laugh bubbling up. "Just like you told me to be." No, it's not that," she wailed, her panic palpable. "Isabella, it's the bank. The police called. The accounts are empty. You took everything." A cold, hard smile spread across my face. "What are you talking about?" I asked, feigning ignorance, my heart pounding in my chest with a thrilling mix of sorrow and triumph. "I only took what was mine. Yours. It wasn't yours. It was Thomas's inheritance. You took it all. The account is wiped clean." Her voice broke, and I heard Arthur's panicked murmurs in the background. I felt a surge of triumph, so profound it almost made me dizzy. I had been right all along. Their affection had been a conditional one, tied to Thomas's wealth. Their greed had finally shown their true nature. My voice was steady and firm. "Margaret," I said, using her first name for the first time in 7 years. "The money wasn't Thomas's, it was mine. He made sure of it." Stunned, disbelieving silence. "Thomas and I set up a trust account," I explained, the words a sweet revenge. "He knew what you were like. He knew you would try to take everything from me if anything ever happened to him. So he made sure all of his assets were transferred to me. He trusted me, and he wanted me to be taken care of. It's all gone. Margaret. You have nothing." I hung up the phone. The satisfying click was the final punctuation on my old life, and the beginning of a new one. I wasn't just leaving with a broken heart and a few boxes. I was leaving with a fresh start, a future I could build on my own terms, and a profound sense of peace. Thomas, my kind and loving husband, had taken care of me, even in death, by giving me back my own life. The days and weeks that followed were a whirlwind of quiet activity. I drove to my small hometown, a place I hadn't seen in over a decade. The streets were just as I remembered them, and the sense of community was a stark contrast to the cold, lonely life I had just left. The inheritance Thomas had left me was an opportunity, not just for my own security, but for a greater purpose. I sold a few of the stocks and bonds to acquire a dilapidated, but charming old building on Main Street. With the rest of the funds, I established a charitable foundation, dedicated to supporting single mothers and underprivileged children, a cause close to my heart. As I had once been an ambitious young woman, with little to my name, I named the foundation the Thomas and Isabella Foundation, a tribute to the man who had loved me unconditionally, and the new life he had given me. It was a testament to our shared values, a way to honor his memory by continuing his legacy of kindness. My days were now filled with the fulfilling work of helping others. And in every smile I saw, every family I helped, I felt his presence. He was still taking care of me, and now, through me, he was taking care of others.